Let me know when we're live.
We are live. Let me just check. Make sure we're live on YouTube. Let everyone kind of roll in here. All right. Yep, we're live. We're good.
At Domino's, delivery is
Okay.
All right. What's happening?
All right. Welcome everybody. Oh, I hear echo.
You hear echo? Do you have? Okay.
All right. Yeah, I think you have to shut your audio off because it's like.
Then I won't be able to hear you.
I don't think I hear any echo coming from Turtleboy's side.
I don't hear an echo.
Maybe was that just the stream? We had the stream open briefly.
Maybe so. Yeah, that might have been it. I don't have the window going
okay.
on my screen, so.
Yeah, I think we're good now. Dylan, let us know if the lag, or pardon me, not the lag, if the echo does come back.
Okay. I'm hearing like a delay of everything you're saying like twice. There's definitely an echo going on.
Can you
maybe
manage
try
it?
leaving and coming back?
All right, let's see. It looks like you brought an audience. I see a million people in the comments already saying America first. Is that you or Dylan's people?
Okay.
Hopefully
that was my fault. That was my fault. I had the stream playing. So, okay, on with it. Now, we are ready to go. So I've got here Aiden Kearney. Aiden, also known as Turtleboy, is a former high school teacher. Massachusetts, he taught history for 11 years before getting suspension for starting a blog that expressed conservative opinions the school did not approve of. He eventually had to leave teaching because of an attack from another blogger and was offered a year's pay, and he used that to start his current blog and business, Turtleboy Sports. And on the other side, I have got Patrick Casey. Patrick is the president of American Identity Movement, a right-wing activist organization and fraternity. His work has been featured on The Today Show, Fox News, The Washington Post, and many major outlets. Patrick holds a bachelor's BA in anthropology from SDSU and lives in the greater DC area. And last but not least, we have me. I am Dylan Volk, and if you want to know who I am, I have a YouTube channel where I do social commentary and cultural comedic commentary, youtube.com/realdylanvolk. And I also have a book that's behind me, Bad Choices Make Good Stories, My Life with Autism, and that's my auto bio. But all right, on with it. Let's get started. The first topic we want to talk about, I have immigration. So why don't do you guys want to both kind of summarize your thoughts in general on the immigration question? You want to start out with Turtleboy?
Sure. I mean, I think this is one we're probably going to agree pretty much on this one. I think we should enforce the border, obviously. I've changed my mind on the wall. I don't know how you guys feel about the wall. I was not a wall guy at first. I thought it was a 10-foot wall requires an 11-foot ladder. I thought it was kind of a waste of money. It wouldn't solve a problem. I feel like most people who were here illegally came here on visas and overstayed them, so it would not be solving a problem. However, recent events in Mexico, particularly close to the border, I think it was 2-3 months ago, there was a family of 7 or 8 people, a bunch of kids. They're all murdered down there, just 10 miles from the border. That kind of opened my eyes. Mexico is a lawless country essentially, and it's kind of silly not to have a wall. So I've changed my mind on the wall. I think I'm pro wall now. And generally, I'd like to hear more about what Patrick has to say about it. See if there's any areas we disagree.
Sure. So at the very least, I support an end to illegal immigration. I think if you're right of center, hopefully that's a position that you have at this point. But beyond that, I support an immigration moratorium. I support net zero immigration. We've had far too much immigration from the wrong places for decades at this point. The demographic transformation that America has undergone and continues to undergo is something that basically most Americans from the founders up until people in the 60s, and even many people now, didn't vote for, certainly don't want, and for me, it's something a little bit deeper than just people need to come here legally, or yes, we need a slight reduction in legal immigration, we need a moratorium, and beyond that, we need to recognize that America, without its historic demographics, is not going to be able to be America. So that summarizes my position.
So moratorium, like no more legal immigration?
No, an immigration moratorium is in no immigration indefinitely. Maybe not indefinitely, not forever, but I support a total shutdown on legal immigration and illegal immigration. When I say a total one, I mean maybe very small numbers here and there, like if you have like a physicist from another country that you just really need, sure, that's one thing. But the fact of the matter is, when Donald Trump talked about the quote unquote Muslim ban, which obviously wasn't a Muslim ban, it was a travel ban from various countries that have a lot of terrorism and so forth. He said we need a moratorium. I don't remember the exact words. We need a moratorium until we can figure out what the hell's going on. That is my position on immigration overall, and I think probably the big point of contention between the two of us, Aiden, Turtleboy, is that is that we I am far more restrictive on legal immigration, whereas I think you tend to be a little less in support of restrictions there.
How come?
Why do I support restrictions on legal immigration?
Yeah. Just out of curiosity.
Sure. Yeah, so there are a number of reasons to support restricting legal immigration. I'd say you have economic ones, you have cultural ones, identitarian ones. With the economic ones, I mean, in the effects of the negative effects of legal immigration on workers are quite often the same as legal immigration. There are obviously different dynamics at play. There are two different things, but at the same time, the more workers you have, right, the less companies have to pay them. It's just supply and demand. I mean, you look at one statistic, you have 50% of STEM employees, STEM graduates rather, are working outside of the STEM field, right? And if you talk to people who have STEM degrees, whether they're working in the field, in the actual STEM field, these people are surrounded by H-1B workers, right? These people are surrounded by cheap foreign labor. These people who come here, who can be paid less, who are dependent upon their employers for staying in the country, and it's almost kind of a form of neo-feudalism where these foreign workers are brought in. And sure, they get a better deal here than they get in America, but they get to be paid far less. So there are negative ramifications from an economic perspective, on harmful effects on workers. But beyond that, to me, I think the defining one really is the question of identity. Is America going to be able to stay America if we lose our white majority? And that is, to that question, I would absolutely say no. It won't be able to.
Why? Why does America? So what you say? I mean, white's a broad term. So historically, Italians were once looked down upon as dirty people, like in American history, right? Before the Irish, there's waves of immigration. Whatever the new wave of immigration is, has historically always been viewed as the dirty one. What makes Mexicans any different than what Italians were 150 years ago?
Sure. Well, I just want to say this. I'm not basing my immigration, positions based on who I perceive to be dirty. It's more a question
you said the wrong countries.
Compatibility.
You said the wrong. You said the word was wrong countries. What makes these countries the wrong ones as opposed to Southern and Eastern Europe? Why are those the right ones?
It's just a question of compatibility. It's a question of identity differences. When you look here, the people that are coming to our country, both just overall, the most are. It used to be Hispanics. Now it's largely Asians, although Hispanics are somewhat in a close second place. So these people come to America, and when they're coming over here by the millions, we're bringing in something like 1.5 million people every year. That's legal and illegal. People tend to assimilate less, right? When they're in ethnic enclaves, when they go and they're whether it's Chinese people, Hispanics, just broader Asian American advocacy groups, these people come over and they're not losing their identity, and I don't think that's a really good dynamic. For people to come to a society and to not assimilate, to not see themselves as American. Now, granted, there are other deeper issues as well. Just at the very least, I mean, we're really past the point where people are even expected to assimilate at this point. At least, from the left.
Why not just have immigration and then, because I'm with you on the assimilation thing. I think that no matter who you are when you come here, you should assimilate to our culture, right? I think that's a reasonable request to make. So, but why do you have to cut off immigration when we could just be encouraging assimilation instead?
we already do encourage assimilation, and I think what we find is that the more people of a particular ethnic group that are in the country that they immigrate to, the less likely they are to assimilate. I mean, if you go to Southern California, there are entire swaths of Southern California that are you feel like Mexico, right? I used to live in San Diego. The people that come over, they go live in those areas and they're not assimilating. Also, we have to deconstruct just the idea of assimilation, right? Just it's not a binary thing. Either you assimilate or you don't. There are people who come here and they get their citizenship either through, because their parents, give birth to them here, even though they're not citizens, or they go through the process, whatever. There are people who are citizens, who speak the language, who work jobs, who pay their taxes, sure. But, they're still, they cheer for Mexico when the Mexican soccer team comes, right?
Yeah, but I cheer for Ireland.
And if you take that dynamic... Pardon me?
I cheer for Ireland too, and I've never even been to Ireland. I mean, not when if they went against USA, I wouldn't. But you don't. What nationality are you historically?
I'm of Irish descent too. Yeah, I'm not really into soccer, man. I like to believe I would cheer for the American team there. I like to believe I don't have
we suck at
loyalties,
soccer,
but
yeah.
Can I insert something in here?
Sure.
Patrick, are you saying basically? Is what I think I might hear you saying is that there's a difference basically between different groups of white people who are all kind of European descent and then other groups who are from other parts of the world. Are there fundamental differences there, is what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that historically most of the immigration that we've seen, right, the perceived dirty Italians, I'm not going to accuse Turtleboy of actually thinking Italians are dirty, but, the perceived, Ellis Island era, 19th century immigration. Yeah, so those were immigrants from Europe, right? Those were immigrants who came from the same continent from which America came from. So it's a big difference between that.
There's a big difference between Southern Europe and Western. Yeah, big difference between there's a big difference between Southern European culture and Western European culture. They're extremely different. When the Irish came here,
but is the difference between the two of those greater than the difference between European culture, Western culture in general, and Chinese culture? I don't think it is.
Well, first of all, Chinese culture they did a great job assimilating Asian cultures, whereas Italian cultures they were the one they were welcome here specifically because they did not assimilate. We didn't between 1880 and 1920. There was an extreme fear of Italian immigration in this country because Italian workers came here without a plan to stay. They came here to work and then move back to the old country. They didn't learn language. They lived in ethnic neighborhoods like you're talking about. They were extremely unwelcome. Whereas Irish immigrants, Dutch immigrants, when they came here, they wanted to become part of the American identity. So the things that you're saying right now, I mean, these are age-old tropes used. And my question is, wouldn't that have been unfair to your ancestors if they had, been met with similar restrictions?
I'll say this. I mean, again, there's a big difference between cutting off immigration to Europeans, right? There's a big, and cutting off immigration to other parts of the world, right? They're two different dynamics, I would argue. However, I think you're, in a sense, maybe proving my point if you're saying that even with Southern Europeans coming over, it still caused some issues, right? So that would make me think that, if you take that a step further, again, the cultural difference between Southern Europeans and Western Europeans is nowhere near as great as Westerners overall and Asians, right, and Hispanics.
I disagree.
So,
I disagree with that.
If it was causing issues when it was different Europeans coming together living in America, and it absolutely did cause issues, then I think that would certainly give, that would certainly bolster the argument that, immigrants from a greater cultural and civilizational difference is going to cause even further issues. As to whether or not it was unfair for Catholic immigrants, Southern, Italian, Polish, Irish, to be treated that way, I mean, that's kind of up for debate. I think that it did cause some issues, but at the end of the day, it did end up working out. But I don't think that immigration, the way it's going now, is going to work out. And again, it is different. I don't think that comparing the immigration that happened in, mostly throughout the 19th century and what we're experiencing now is remotely comparable.
Okay.
Now, Aiden, can I insert another thing here? I think what Aiden is trying to say is kind of like that there are American values, and if there are people that want to come here to become Americanized, then we should look beyond, the color of their skin, and maybe we should put the emphasis on people who just want to become American. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's
Aiden?
absolutely what I'm saying. Okay, so put it this way, and Matt, if it was if Mexican and Honduran immigrants were coming here, right, and they were anxious to assimilate, would you have a problem with them coming here?
Well, again, what does assimilation really mean in that
Speak
sense,
the language
right?
is a big part of it. Learn the language.
Learning the language, right? So that's better than just totally living in a parallel society, right? And being on the dole and so forth. I think we can probably agree there. But nonetheless, there are many other reasons to oppose mass immigration. Again, the effects on workers, as we previously discussed, right? Lowering wages, job displacement.
Are they? Is that true?
Especially,
is that true though? I mean, are your wages lowered by immigrants?
I don't exactly work in an industry where I'm competing with too many immigrants, right? I run a dissident nonprofit, so that's not really an issue
who is
for me.
Then? I mean,
however, it's basic supply and demand. The more of something that you have, the less value that it has, right? If you have 10 people trying to work a job, then there's going to be there's going to be some competition. If you have thousands of people, then there's going to be lots of competition. So your employers want to have there to be more competition among workers so that they can pay them less. That's just the way that it works. I mean, you've seen. Hold on, real quick. You've seen these articles come out lamenting the fact that the labor pool shortened as a result of Trump, and now these companies they're forced to pay their employees more. Right? That's the natural way to raise wages for people, as opposed to what the left wants to do and set like a federal minimum wage of what. $15 or something that would be totally devastating. So there are demonstrable negative effects on workers. Economically, there's also the H-1B, the H-2B visas, and so forth. So purely from an economic perspective, I would absolutely oppose continued mass immigration from the third world. Now I would oppose immigration from Hondurans and Mexicans. You can specify the quantity. So, if you're talking about 10 people coming here per year, that's obviously a little bit different.
You said moratorium, right? As in cut it off for a while, indefinitely?
Yeah. So the moratorium's the ideal, right? If someone wanted to come along and cut legal immigration to 200,000 people per year, I would support that as well.
Okay.
It's not moratorium or bust, but I think the immigration moratorium, this really brought to light when Tucker had a guest on about a month ago who came on and called for immigration moratorium, and I think it's a really good idea to introduce because it really does get people thinking about the effects of mass immigration, the way that we've been, that the immigration system in this country has been ran for decades at this point. So it is a really good meme to kind of introduce. But again, is that the only option I'm willing to accept at this point? No, but that is kind of the ideal.
Do you fear a white?
I have a question,
Go ahead.
Aiden.
Go ahead.
I guess my question is, what you're saying sounds pretty similar to kind of what I hear most liberals saying. So what separates you from, what do you disagree with the left when it comes to this issue? Like, where do you disagree?
Well, first of all, the left is for open borders, like literally, like let anyone in. It's essentially what they.
I mean, most of the left I don't hear. I don't hear saying that's the far left.
No, that's like the mainstream left now. They can call it whatever they want to call it. This idea that people can just walk over the border, declare amnesty at will, and then just live here indefinitely, that's open borders. They can call it whatever they want to call it. Obviously, there are still, ports of entry that they're coming in, but essentially it achieves the whole thing. On top of that, what's unsustainable about what the left wants is that they want open borders and a welfare state. That's insane. That's obviously a system that's built to fail. I don't favor any of that. I just don't. It's like there's this weird obsession from you guys with, white skin. Like immigrants are coming in.
Whoa, don't put me in that.
Well, Patrick said the wrong country, right? What's wrong?
Moderating.
I mean, am I wrong? Did I get something wrong there?
Accusing you. He was talking.
I mean, is that accurate? Would you say? Not for you, Dylan.
No, I wouldn't. I think you're describing a dynamic that certainly exists. I think that I would object to your characterization of what I'm about as a weird obsession with white skin. So America has always been, or for most of its history, has been a nation conscious of demographics, right? The Naturalization Act of 1790, we created this, our founding fathers created this new country. They got together and said, okay, what kind of, let's talk about the kind of person that can come to America and become an American citizen, the kind of person that come to America and be a naturalized citizen. And it explicitly states that America was to be a white country. It explicitly says for something along the lines of white men of good moral character. So, or white people of good moral character. So the point there is you see what my perception of the world is this weird obsession. Well, the founding fathers had this same weird obsession, and right up into 1965, which is the Immigration Act that set this demographic transition into motion, Americans had to be told by Ted Kennedy and others that it would not upset our country's racial and ethnic demographics, right? America has always been a demographically conscious country. The only reason that you perceive the way that I see things, identitarianism, as something that's kind of out there, is because that this way of viewing the world, which again has been historically American, has been deliberately censored by the powers that be. Right after World War II, there was a direct it's just a result of globalism and leftism, right? The pathologization of white identity and just the push for open borders and so forth. So I understand that you oppose open borders from more of a civic nationalist perspective. We can certainly find some common ground there. But, my position really is that America is not going to be America if we lose the historic demographics of this country. You can't replace the people, the stock essentially of a nation with someone else, with people from all over the world, and expect to get the same thing. Because at the end of the day, America is not just a set of abstract ideals. There's part of that. There's the creedal aspect, to be sure. But America is the product of Western people, particularly white people, who built the country.
Okay, so what's white? How do you define white? What's white?
I would define white as someone of European descent.
How far south? What about Sicilians? Are they white?
Sure.
Are Portuguese white?
Yeah.
You sure about that?
So I get what you're going for here. Race is a spectrum.
Exactly.
Right, absolutely it is. But in many different areas, it's a totally valid method. It's totally valid to apply.
Did we lose you? Did we lose him? Hold on. Uh-oh. We're going to call him back. Hold on. Who's winning the debate? That's the real question. Not the best, though. Let's see. Oops, something went wrong. We're working through some technical difficulties here. Turtleboy favors what the Democrats want. Huge liberal pussy. Thomas Paine in Common Sense writes about the USA to be a pan. Oh, good God. What's wrong with these people? All right. Missed call. All right. See what happens here. That was going well. I thought it was going well. Let's see. Oh, Dylan started a call. All right, we got Dylan back.
Okay, are we back?
Yeah, we're back.
Did it freeze for anybody else?
It froze. You were out of it for like a couple minutes, and then it ended. Now I don't see Patrick. There he is. Okay. All right, we're back. We're back in business.
Awesome.
Okay, sorry about that. All right. So,
no worries. Yeah, these things happen.
Yeah. So my point here is like you're saying like what is the beauty of America is that we were the only country. Well, I guess we're Canada too. Really, the only country in the world that was exclusively founded by immigration. Right. It's literally a melting pot. And that's the American identity. The American identity is mixing of various nationalities, races, and stuff like that, no?
Somewhat. So it was. America was founded by settlers and colonists, right? The immigration came later. The people who founded America, they weren't immigrating to a new country. These were people that came over and found a vast, pristine wilderness and proceeded to carve the most powerful country, for better or for worse, in the history of the world out of it. So I'd say that's a little bit more about, how I would characterize America's founding. Other than that, it's, at the beginning, this sense of multiculturalism kind of really wasn't there. Again, that's why later when you had people from other parts of Europe coming in, they were like, wait, this isn't what we had in mind. Now, there were some issues that were caused by Ellis Island era immigration, by European immigration, Catholic immigration in the 1900s, or pardon me, the 19th century. As to whether or not that should have or shouldn't have happened, that's not what I'm interested in debating at this point. But I do think that I just don't think it's accurate to characterize the American identity as just being totally creedal. American identity, if you want to go for Sam Huntington's perspective, he wrote this fantastic book called Who Are We? And in there he identifies a number of different components of American identity. You have the creedal element, which is what civic nationalists, mainstream conservatives, people a little more of your ilk are like to focus on, right? Limited government, personal responsibility, laissez-faire, right? Stuff like that. You also had the ethnic, racial, and religious components as well. But what's happened over time is that there's been a process of erosion by which each of these components has.
What do you mean religious components? What religion are you talking about?
Protestantism.
Okay, so what about Catholics?
Well, yeah. So again, so there's been this process of erosion by which the original components of American identity have kind of been watered down. And yeah, Catholics came a little later. There were Catholics
because there was a lot of
they were very few. And
there is a lot of bigotry towards Catholics in this country. We've had as many Catholic presidents as we've had black presidents, and a lot of people don't know that. And like a lot of the countries I meant, Ireland and Italy, those are the primary countries that brought Catholic immigrants over there, and they were unwelcomed.
Sure.
And most Latin American countries are also Catholic. Is there any of that bias? Like if Mexico was a Protestant country, would you be less opposed to Mexican immigration?
No. And just for the record, I'm just kind of tracing the history of American identity. I was raised Catholic. I guess I'm a lapsed Catholic at this point. I don't go to church, so I'm not like a Bible bashing Protestant who hates Catholics by any means. I'm just saying that there has been this process of erosion. So American identity at the beginning did have creedal, racial, religious, and cultural components, and that process has been eroded. So we're really at the point now where it's just the creedal component is in mainstream culture, that's kind of the main thing that's left, and even that. We're seeing the left is getting rid of that, right? The idea of personal responsibility, some limited government, laissez-faire economics, separation of church and state. I guess the left still cares about that somewhat, but increasingly progressivism is kind of becoming a state religion. That's a different issue now. But my point here is that you can either just go along with the process, or you can take a step back and say, this is going to destroy America if we don't reclaim some sense of identity. And to me, part of that identity, it's not making America a white ethno-state. It's not saying black people have to go back to Africa. I've never called for that. It's about recognizing that preserving the demographic composition of this country is really integral to preserving the country overall.
All right. Can I change subject a little bit here? So this whole Groyper movement, this is my big disagreement with Fuentes and how I met Dylan in the first place. I think it's destructive to conservatism. I think it's the equivalent of what AOC and the Squad are doing for the left, and that is radicalizing it, making it look bad, making it unelectable, and I think all of the going after people like Charlie Kirk. Like Charlie Kirk has been instrumental in turning this demographic of people who would naturally be liberal and going into college campuses, and he's probably converted tens of thousands of young people to conservatism. No?
I'm doubtful of that. Maybe I'm sure he's converted some people. As to how many, I don't know. What I'll say about this is that yes, what the Groyper War, the Groyper thing, was chaotic, and that's because it needs to be, right? There's been a long process in conservatism of kicking people out who dare voice unpopular, truths and opinions. That happened to Peter Brumlow, it happened to Steve Saylor, it happened to John Derbyshire, Sam Francis, brilliant men of the West who have absolutely sacrificed quite a bit for the best interests of this country and our civilization overall. So what happened with the Groyper War is that we found a way to bypass the filter, right? Charlie Kirk says he wants to have all of these open discussion, free market of ideas, blah, blah, blah. Well, the free market of ideas came to him, right? The open debate, whatever, and he didn't like the result because Conservatism Inc., which TPUSA and Charlie Kirk are absolutely part of, it can't exist without setting limitations on discourse, which again is that's part of the globalist power structure overall. You see it on the left too.
Yeah.
So look, I'll say this: some of the questions that were asked were inappropriate. Some of them were
ridiculous. Ridiculous. The questions they were asking Rob Smith were absurd.
All of them were absurd.
No, but like anal sex, just like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, right. Because we accept this dude who likes dudes, we're gonna accept like people reading what do you call it? Drag queen story hour. It's the same thing. Like, come on, it was silly. Some of those questions, they were ridiculous.
Maybe. I mean, we are at the point where drag queens are being promoted by TPUSA, right. So I don't think it's.
Where's TPUSA promoting drag queens? I must have missed that one.
Yeah, you did. It's okay though. So Poplitics is a show, I guess, that's hosted by this girl Alex Clark. It's produced by TPUSA. She's an influencer. She was on some reality TV show. She did an Instagram post talking about how she got Botox when she's like in her 20s. Anyways, she had a base drag queen on to talk about how how the libs are triggered by this drag queen who's totally like conservative. It's like, oh, I'm a drag queen, but I oppose drag queen story hour. And conservatism makes like, yes, we need to get this person out there. So that's literally TPUSA promoting a drag queen. And the fact that you find that startling really speaks volumes as to the direction that things are heading in. And I look, as to the question of how does anal sex help win the culture war, would I have asked that question? No, I think that what that guy was getting at is a real dynamic that needs to be discussed, and that is the cultural shift to the left. Things just keep going to the left. All traditional mores and values and norms are just totally being upended, and conservatives are usually a few decades behind, right? They'll oppose it at first, but then a few decades later they'll go along with it. And the fact that conservatives are now promoting drag queens and think it's okay, and Lady Maga, by the way, has been promoted by a number of conservatives too, really shows that yes, I mean, asking how anal sex wins the culture war, probably would phrase it a little differently.
Yeah.
But that dynamic is real, and it needs to be brought, attention needs to be brought.
So here's the thing. When people ask questions like that, you understand, it's hard for people to take you seriously when you ask questions like that. So if Nick Fuentes, his big thing is he wants to get in a debate with Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk, whatever. First of all, you're punching up. They're a little above your pay grade. They have much larger platforms and followings than you do. They'd be doing you a favor, not vice versa, if they were to actually debate you.
That's why he's going for it.
I've challenged Nick to a debate. He responded by blocking me, which means he is a hypocrite and a coward, and doesn't actually believe any. His twin sister, big Obama supporter too. So I have my doubts about Nick's authenticity in the first place, and I feel like he's just a grifter. He makes a lot of.
His sister supports Obama, so you're doubting Nick's commitment.
Yes, very much so. I would doubt. I would highly.
How does that work?
You come from a family like that where your twin sister, and all of a sudden this guy is like the leader of the alt-right. Come on. I doubt his. I sincerely question his authenticity.
He's never described himself as alt-right. That's pretty.
Whatever you want to call it.
To bring someone's family into it.
I think it's more than fair. Hunter Biden's being dragged into it. I mean, we're having impeachment right now because we're dragging family into it with Hunter Biden. Like, come on, family. Like, let's where you come from.
That's a legal thing though. That's a legal thing. I mean, I'm not offended that you brought up his sister. I just don't think that the argument really follows. I don't think that Nick is secretly, he is a hypocrite. Or secretly a liberal.
He is a hypocrite
because his sister.
He is a hypocrite.
She's a young girl. She's in college. That's just kind of the trend. That's kind of how that demographic tends to be.
Well, okay.
But whatever. We don't have to.
And the other part was that it's just when some of his clips or whatever, they've been accused of pulling Media Matters by taking clips and making them look bad. It's like, but I've listened to the whole clips in their entirety. Some of them are just so absurd and stupid. He had a rant once in which he was talking about. He actually said that segregation was a good thing for black people. That we should. It's not so bad. It's just you drink this water fountain and I drink this one. That is such an ignorant and stupid and misinformed way to look at American history, and it shows you know nothing about Jim Crow if you actually subscribe to that. It's ridiculous.
Right. Well, Nick's my friend. We work together. like anyone else in the world, I don't agree with everything he says. I agree with most of what he says, and that's why we get along and are political allies. So I'm not really interested in.
Right, I'm not saying that
Nick said this.
I apologize if it makes. I'm not saying that you believe those things.
Can I say something?
My point. Hold on. My point was just that is a big reason. Clips like that are a big reason why Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk and people like that aren't going to take him seriously, because that's ridiculous.
Okay. Well, real quick, Dylan. Before.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
I think there was a valid question in what he said. That was also with the statement about the sisters. Why Nick Fuentes says that he wants, open discourse, and that Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro, they don't really want an open exchange of ideas. Why does he block so many people, or why did he block him when he challenged him to a debate?
Okay, cool. I'll answer both of those questions because I think they're worth discussing. The first one is the Nick blocking people question. Obviously, that's a big thing on everyone's mind all the time. Is why is Nick blocking everyone? I can't answer that question. From what Nick is, he's definitely a very fiery guy, and that's part of the reason why people like him. It's also why people dislike him. So he's quick to block. That's just how some people are on Twitter. If he doesn't like what you're filling his mentions with, he'll just go ahead and block you. As to whether or not that makes him a hypocrite in this situation or that situation, I'll leave that up for you to decide. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That's the thing with debates, right? You certainly brought attention to an accurate dynamic, and that is that people with more followers, with more clout, don't have they're disincentivized from engaging with people who are beneath them, not in terms of like moral worth, but beneath them in terms of followers and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, look, if I was Ben Shapiro, I would not debate Nick Fuentes. I mean, unless he was convinced that he would totally mop the floor with him. But I think he kind of understands that even if they do disagree, even if Ben thinks that he's correct on something, a lot of what the dissident right is discussing are suppressed truths that you really can't talk about because you lose your job. I'm convinced that people like Ben Shapiro know about realities of race and IQ, of race and crime, of a number of these things.
What do you mean race and crime? What do you mean race and crime?
Race and crime. So I'm pointing out, for example, that despite only being 13% of the population, black people commit over 50% of all murders, right? These kinds of discussions.
Why do you think that is?
And there are conservatives who will discuss that.
Why do you think that is? I mean, I'd like to discuss that. Why do you think that is?
Why do I think that is? Well, I think there are a number of factors at play there. I know that there is a big correlation between IQ and crime. Basically, people with lower IQs are more impulsive. They commit more crimes. So that's
why do
part
black
of it.
people have lower IQs on average?
They do, yeah.
Why?
Now, as to whether why do they have? Well, so that's an interesting. Again, I'm going to leave that up for the scientists to decide. But from what I've gathered from looking at the research and the literature, which can. Right. Well, I mean, I wasn't really taught this in anthropology. It's it is very left wing these days, as you can understand. So, from what I've gathered from looking at the research, is that there is a genetic factor in intelligence, right? We know that from parent to child, there's quite a bit of you do get a lot of your brains from your parents, and that's a result of genetics. Now, as to whether or not genetics play a role in the group differences, right, not individual differences, group differences, that's up for debate, right, and it's currently being debated. However, it's a lot of the evidence points to there being, as the research on genetics keeps on coming out, it continually points to there being more of a reality of genetics playing a role in group differences. So I'll say this: I don't think that any race has achieved its potential at this point. Black people are absolutely part of America, and I'm not opposed to, I'm opposed to just like endlessly throwing welfare at the black community. It's very clear that hasn't done any good.
Or the white
I'm not
community.
opposed to, doing something to try to help alleviate the situation that the black communities. Poverty, is it? I think that's better for everyone. For that, just the ghettos to stop being ghettos, so to speak. But I don't think that the oppression narrative really holds up when it comes to why group disparities, right? Disparities in group outcomes. Why does this racial group or this ethnic group do better or worse than another?
Well, I disagree. Can I just jump in?
Historical factors, but it's not. There is more to it than that, and we can. I can explain further, but I'll let you.
I do disagree with the premise that you see like it's almost neurological or biological that black people are not doing as well because of IQ, and I think what I was getting at there is, I am fully of the belief that historical injustices, I don't believe in reparations or anything like that, but I think we're denying reality if we pretend that, hundreds of years of slavery and then followed by 100 more years of Jim Crow, in which black people were systematically denied the ability to go to good schools, to go to colleges, etc. And then we're supposed to snap our fingers and say, well, it's genetic. That's why you're not doing as well. No, they're not doing as well because of historical injustices, because that takes hundreds of years to overcome. That is not just going to end overnight. I don't think liberalism is the answer, because their solution is to keep black people trapped in cycles of poverty, which is counterproductive by, essentially having an endless welfare state. But I just disagree completely with the idea that because you're black, or of color or whatever, that you are genetically predisposed to not be as intelligent.
Okay. Well, I understand where you're coming from. I'll say this. If you look at IQ in Africa, around the world, you look at IQ of blacks in most countries. I mean, is it higher in other countries? Do you know that? I'll tell you right now, it's not. It's actually lower. So African Americans
Why do you think that is? Why do you think black IQ in Africa is lower?
Let me guess. Because the white colonialists came in and just totally ended the brilliant civilization that they had there.
I wouldn't say brilliant civilization. I would not say brilliant civilization, but I would certainly say imperialism had a little bit to do with that. No.
I don't think that's the case. I mean, if white people didn't come into Africa, now they would have nothing, right? If we just totally left them alone, they wouldn't have gone through,
They got safaris now.
The level of. Pardon me?
What do they got now? What do they have now? What have we built for them there? Safaris? Like what are they? What is it? What's in Africa?
You can go to the Ivory Coast. You can go to South Africa. You can go to many places where white men have gone in and built civilization, and they have the remnants of that. But once black people take control of that, we see what happens. We saw it in South Africa. We saw that in Rhodesia, right? You have Mugabe, who took away the white farmers' land, and then later he's like, "Oh, please come back, white farmers! Everyone's starving." But that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down. But I think what you find is that, look at it this way. So you're making the argument that black people are not doing as well as white people and other groups in America because they have been oppressed in the past. Now, I certainly wouldn't deny that African Americans have faced, oppression, however you want to define that, in this country. But you can look at it this way. There are groups in this country that have faced, pushback, have faced, limited opportunities and some degree of oppression, of discrimination because of their race, that actually do better than white people, right? Asian Americans are a good example. So I don't think that it fully holds up, right?
Why do you think Asian Americans?
Why
do you think Asian Americans do so well?
Well, their average IQ is quite high. It's in fact higher than that of Europeans by a few points.
Why? Why do you think it's higher?
Well, they come from they have a history of civilization, and civilization does have selective effects. The longer you have civilization in the sense that we understand it, the longer the longer it's going to be selected for traits like intelligence. That's why areas that generally have longer histories of civilization tend to be higher.
I think you're missing a big aspect.
Higher IQ.
You're missing. I think you're missing the most
important aspect.
Cultural. The most important part. The reason that Asians do so well is because historically, Asian cultures, they value respect in the home. They value respect towards adults in authority. And so when an Asian kid doesn't do well in his math, the American identity is to blame the teacher now. I mean, I was a teacher. And that's the thing now. It's like, you did bad in school? Well, it must be the teacher's fault. What are they doing wrong? In Asian families, that does not happen. It is your fault. You need to figure shit out, or else you're bringing shame on this family. Get your shit together. B in math? Are you fucking kidding me? I mean, it's a stereotype, but it's somewhat true.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that Asian people have created a very smart culture, right? So it sounds like what you're saying is
Yeah,
that
but
smart people create
there's
smart
downfalls
culture.
to that culture too, though.
The argument that I would make is that the intelligence is it precedes the culture, right? If you're higher IQ, you're just going to understand the way the world works better, and your culture is going to manifest that, right? You're going to be able to understand which strategies work and which don't, and that's why you're going to be able to apply them. I don't think that Asian people had good culture before they were high IQ. It just doesn't really work that way.
I gotta be honest. So I want
to go back to something.
Oh, yeah.
Aiden, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Dylan.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to go back to something. Aiden, you were just to go back for a second to a few minutes ago. Aiden, you said that because of some of the things that Nick Fuentes says, nobody like a Ben Shapiro or a Charlie Kirk is going to take him seriously. Isn't that kind of the same thing as what happened to you in your experience in public education, where because of your ideas, they all said, boo to you and kicked you out? I mean, aren't you kind of saying basically the same thing as what's happened to you? Do you get my question?
I mean, I do, but you're comparing apples and
they
oranges.
didn't take your ideas seriously, so they kicked you out.
No, I mean, because I'm working for the government. You know what I mean? I'm working with children, with PC institutions. I mean, I was no longer welcome teaching because of my, my language.
Because of your ideas, right?
Yeah, and the language, I think, goes along with it. I swear
because
a lot.
Because of your ideas, right?
I think, ideas, but more language.
I thought it was your ideas.
I mean, the ideas that it would be hard they couldn't terminate me because of my ideas. They could terminate me because I called some chick a fupa sloth or something like that, which I have a tendency to do, or a cunt or something like that. That they could get me on because they can say this is a bad role model for children. They can get you, and that's the government I'm dealing with. Whereas, he's trying to. You're talking about private institutions, and Ben and Nick. Ben doesn't have. You see what I'm saying? It's not quite the same thing. It's also not an employer-employee relationship.
Yeah, but the principle isn't the. I see there's the technicality of it's the government versus these are private institutions and people, but the principle is the same, which is basically policing thought crimes.
No, that's true. Okay, so I guess if I'm Ben Shapiro, and I'll just play devil's advocate here, and I look at this and I'm like, I can't take somebody seriously. I don't think they think Nick's trying to be serious because he gets on there and he talks about that ridiculous rant he had about the cookies. I mean, that's absurd. It's like, okay, I can't take this person seriously if they go on a rant about that and they go, oh, Jim Crow, segregation, big deal, get over it. It's like, that's not a serious person looking at a serious conversation. I mean, Patrick's much better, I gotta be honest. I'm impressed by Patrick.
Let me chime in. Yeah, so there's, a lot of people who are political commentators, sometimes they have to choose between if they want to be, edgelords or if they want to be, serious commentators. Nick's someone in between, right? I mean, Nick isn't running for office. He wants his program to be enjoyable. He wants it to be funny. He does want it to be edifying at the same time. Whether or not you agree with that it is any of those things is certainly your.
It's entertaining. I'll give him that. It is entertaining.
I'll say this: the idea that Nick or anyone else deserves to be or must be totally shut out of conservatism of the right wing in this country, shunned from polite society because of these 10-second clips or whatever is really absurd. I mean, you have someone like Ben Shapiro who is he's an identitarian, right? It's okay if you're an identitarian just as long as you're not a white one. He is called explicitly for ethnic cleansing, the forced removal of people based on their race from a country, and he's given prime speaking slots, right? So you have to admit, at the very least, there's a double standard at play.
You're talking about Israel, I assume?
And so when people take issue with identitarianism, they take issue with basically the people who created America exercising, the right to self-determination in the country. It's when it's someone like Ben Shapiro who's advocating for the ethnic cleansing of his homeland, thousands of miles away, then he gets a pass, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I mean, I think I have many complaints about Ben Shapiro. Believe me, what we're trying to do here ultimately is win elections, right? We don't want the left to take over the country, and I do feel like by mainstreaming Nick Fuentes and allowing him to become, that's what they want. They want Nick Fuentes to be the voice of the right. I'm banned from Twitter, and I think you are too. And there's a reason that Nick is still on Twitter, because Jack Dorsey and Twitter want people like Nick Fuentes to become the voice of the right. There's a reason he hasn't been kicked off yet, and I have. It's because they want that to happen. They know that people like him are just as destructive to conservatism as AOC is to liberalism.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that.
This kind of goes to a question that I had.
I'd like to.
Go ahead.
I could kind of. Okay.
Dylan, yeah, real quick. So.
Okay.
Yeah, what I'll say about that is, I understand what you're saying. Basically, there's an optics perspective, right? Nick says edgy, controversial things, therefore he's bad for the movement, however you want to define that. However, these are the same people who said this, oftentimes are the ones back during 2016 that made the same argument about Trump. The fact is that people actually like this. People actually like a more, volatile and incendiary approach to things. And you know why? It's because people are mad. People are mad, and they want to see someone with a sense of righteous indignation telling it like it is. That's really why Nick's been able to build up such a big following. And I can say, I'll tell you this, there are many important people who tune into Nick's show, right? You never know who's watching when he's doing that, and he is influencing many of the people that he needs to be influencing with these shows.
Like who?
There needs to be a place on the right where we can discuss controversial ideas, and that is what the dissident right is for. I think Nick understands that he's kind of chosen not to go on the Fox News commentator route. He's probably not going to run for senator anytime soon. So, at that point, he's really about getting people's attention and telling the truth. So that's where some of the edginess and so forth comes in.
Who has he caught the attention of? Who has he caught the attention of that matters? That has in actual influence?
I can't go into that.
Because all I see on his stream are a bunch of sexually repressed white kids in their 20s who like to just troll for fun. I could.
How do you know these kids are sexually repressed?
Because they call themselves celibate.
Analysis on their YouTube.
Yeah, I'm pretty kidding. I saw some of the people asking questions. I saw some of them. Those guys, they could use to get laid. I'm not gonna lie. They could. These are what I see there is.
So you're taking Kimberly Guilfoyle's approach.
Yes, that's correct.
You sound like
she's
like liberal who's calling people incels just because they have like a different opinion. No, I know a lot of the people who ask the questions, and that characterization doesn't really hold up. That's just kind of a cope that people. I
have a hard time.
Are kind of forced to do who don't.
Not a lot of chicks in the movement. You got to be honest. Not a lot of chicks. Does Nick? He doesn't have a lot of female followers. A lot of dudes. He
does. No, he does.
I don't see many on the videos. A lot of dudes.